All right, guys, today we have a Redmax backpack blower. This is a 7500, and we are going to do a complete engine disassembly and just go over some of the things that you probably will run into with your backpack, some of the most common problems. And they're fairly easy to fix. It's pretty much one tool that takes this whole machine apart. So we're going to jump into it. So whatever problem you're having, we will eventually cover it in this tutorial. It'll probably be a pretty lengthy tutorial, so you may have to skim through to get to the part that you need. But if you're looking pretty much for, I have another video up, which will be a little bit below this, which says Redmax head gasket repair, which pretty much disassembles the whole backpack also. But I don't really go into detail about certain things on it. But this tutorial, I'll try to cover more stuff in detail. One of the most common problems you'll run into, obviously, is the carburetor. So the easiest way to get to that is fairly simple, is this air cleaner housing here. You're going to have a clamp on the top and a clamp on the bottom. They both can be taken off with the Torx head that came with your backpack. Or if you have a T25 Torx head, you can use that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take these two clamps off the top, and we're just going to pull this air assembly off. And sometimes they're a little tight, and be careful here because sometimes oil does come out of here. So if you're doing this on your kitchen countertop, you might want to be aware of that. But these Redmaxes are infamous for collecting a lot of oil in here. We're inside of our assembly here now. You're going to need a Phillips head. This is probably one of the only times you'll really need a separate tool for here, here, and there's going to be one on the bottom. We're going to take those three off. Go ahead, loosen those up. And that's just going to pull off just like that. Now you'll be able to reveal your two bolts that actually hold on your carburetors, one here and one here. If you can't see this one, that's probably because your choke is slid up in the way, and they are both Torx heads, so we'll take them off now. All right, and that whole assembly will slide off. Now, if you just need to replace this red choke piece, which breaks a lot, there is a Phillips head screw right there. You'll take that Phillips head screw out, and pretty much this is a two-part system. You may have to get a little screwdriver to pry on this part, but this part will separate, and you'll be able to pull this red part out, and then you can put a new choke assembly on. All right, now your carburetor is just kind of dangling there. You're going to have a yellow line and a black line. Black is always in the back here. All right, so we'll go ahead and disconnect this yellow line, and most of the time fuel is not going to come out of here. And we'll disconnect the back line. All right, now with your throttle, it's the last thing holding the carburetor on. You can pretty much see your cable running through and how it sits down in there. And I apologize if this ain't focusing. I have to get a new phone. My camera lens is cracked, but basically you want to push this to the left right there. You're going to need two hands to do this, so you want to push the throttle in, and the cable should protrude out the back there to where you could just pull the cable up. So you're going to pull it up out of its slot, let go of that, and then you could just slide the cable out of here, just like that. All right, and again, what you were doing was pulling this throttle plate here. You're going to push it in, and then you would pull your cable up out of that slot, and then let it go. All right, now these tend to go bad a lot. I have an ultrasonic cleaner, which I would just throw this into, and I'll do another tutorial on that. But on the back is going to be your gasket. All right, these things get a lot of oil on them. You can pull your gasket up off usually most of the time. Sometimes you get a little bit caked on there. So if you're going to replace your gasket, that is where you'll do it. Right, and that's how you get the carburetor off. A lot of times these primer bulbs will stop priming. Still some fuel in there. But if you're pressing your primer bulb and it stays in, or it's really hard, or there's just no pressure at all, the chances are your carburetor is probably bad. Or if your machine's just not starting, or it's bogging down. It could also be the fuel filter, but if you are changing your carburetor, that's how you get it off. There is a little gasket right here. If yours is missing that gasket, that could be a problem. That gasket just pulls up pretty much with your fingers. This one's a little bit stuck, but you can get a little pick and pull this gasket out of here. Maybe you're having a problem where the machine is only running and then shutting off and stalling. Another thing it could be is these fuel lines here. These go bad a lot. If you're getting air in here, if you got a cracked line or something. This whole assembly, you pretty much, if I could do this with one hand, stick a screwdriver down in this grommet here, and you really could just pry that up like that, and that will pull out your whole fuel filter and everything. And you could buy a whole new fuel line assembly. Pretty much most of your lawn and garden shops will have that. Probably have it on Amazon. And when you put your new one back in, you just drop it down in there, hold one side and push the other side in with the screwdriver, and that'll pop back into place. But take your fuel filter out. You don't have to go through all this. Take your fuel filter out. If you're just changing your fuel filter, really, you could just take your cap off and stick something with a hook, a pick down in there, and you can actually grab the fuel line from here and pull this part only out. And this is the fuel filter. A lot of times it'll have a little metal clamp here. This one does not. The fuel filter would just pop off like that. And you can put a new fuel filter on. Now maybe you're just changing the spark plug, which is located this top boot here. And Redmax has a really tight fit here. And these tend to cut into the boot line a lot. Let me pull this up first. Just pull your hand on the boot and pull up. And if you look, there's not a whole lot of room to play here. It's a very poor design. And you see how the boot sits inside of that little V right there. Well, it's another common problem with these. If yours ain't starting, pull your boot off and look right in this area. A lot of times that plastic cuts into that, and you could be getting a bad spark. If it's cut all the way through, or you can see some wire showing, you might have a bad spark. But the way to change that ignition coil, we're going to get to in a minute. So we're going to move on to the spark plug right now, because we have to work our way down. Now the spark plug, you don't have a whole lot of room to get in here with a ratchet. So that's why they come with this tool. You can see it's a little bit shorter on one side, and you're able to get that tool underneath and just kind of loosen your plug up. Now this isn't reverse thread or anything like that. You just lefty loosey, righty tighty. Remember, I'm doing this at one hand, so I apologize. And you just pull your plug up out of there like that. And then you can proceed to go ahead and put your new plug back in. All right, now if you're having a problem with your pull start, I'll show you how to take that off next. A lot of times you'll pull on these and the cord will not retract back in. So there's a couple things you can either do. A is obviously replace it, but one of the things I found helpful is take this off and put some WD-40 sprayed on the inside and blow some air in there, and just retract it back and forth, and that'll get it working again, because a lot of debris gets caught up inside of here. So to take these off, you're going to have the Torx head there. There's going to be one in the plastic cover right there. This one's missing. One on the side, and you're going to have one on each side on the bottom. And now you pretty much can just pull that pull start right out of there like that. All right. Now, again, these things get a lot of dirt and stuff bound up inside. So when you pull it, sometimes it'll prevent it from coming back. You take some WD-40, just like this. And, well, first, if you have an airline or something, you might want to blow that out, or you could just tap it down on your workbench or something like that. But air typically works better. But you can take a little bit of WD-40 and just spray it around in there. Kind of lube all that up. These are really inexpensive. You can get these pretty much, I know you can get these on Amazon really cheap, but any lawnmower repair shop will have these also, but that's how you get it off. So next we're going to cover replacing the ignition coil, which is right under here where you took off your pull start. It's right at the top under here. And in order to get to that, we got to remove this the shroud here, which is pretty much broken already. But there is some bolts you got to take off to get to the coil. Now, of course, if you're doing the coil, you don't have to go through taking off all this, other stuff. You really just need to jump right to taking this pull start off and taking the shroud off. But there's going to be a bolt here, and there's going to be one here, and then you come around. You're going to have one on the side, but this is broken, so it's not there. And way underneath, there's going to be, well, that one's missing too. There's going to be another one right in that hole down there. So let's go ahead and take those screws off and pull this off. You can see mine fell off just after taking 2 bolts out because it was all busted. Now your coil is exposed. There's your boot here, your wire runs down, here's your coil. You're going to have a bolt there and a bolt there. And when I say a bolt, I mean the Torx heads. You're going to want to retract those 2 out. Now, when you take these 2 out, there's a little black washer behind each one that's going to fall down in your motor here, and you're going to have to tilt the whole machine backwards and shake it for them to come out. And I'll show you what they are as soon as we get it out of there. But everybody that tries to do this on their own, doesn't know those black washers are back there, puts this back on without them spacers, and it doesn't work right. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do this and put the new one on. We'll start by taking those 2 bolts out. All right, so there's our top bolt. The bottom bolt is going to have this black wire going to it. Okay, so remember that. You can pretty much keep that bolt inside of the wire there, or you can just pull it out and set it somewhere. I know where it goes, so I'm going to pull it out, but try not to forget the little black wire goes to the bottom one on the coil. All right, now the coil boot goes up through this little grommet here, which you can pretty much just pull out of here like that. All right, and that'll free the coil up. Then there's another one right here that pretty much can pull this up like that. Okay, and now your coil is free. Okay, now if you look in here, if you're doing this for the first time, you don't see no spacers, you didn't hear them drop, nothing. But I assure you, they were there. And if you don't put the black spacers back on here, it's not going to run right. Okay, so are they stuck on the back here? They're not stuck on the back, which means they already fell down into the motor. Sometimes they're actually stuck on here and covered in grease and you can't see them. So we're going to have to tilt this machine here. Oh, there they go. They just fell out. That's the little black spacer that goes back there. And I can't tell you how many people will put this back together and go, I did it all right. I don't know why it's not working. You didn't put those on. That's why. All right, but here's your coil. And you don't really need to replace this wiring, but I will cover it if you do. If you're just replacing the coil, if you turn it around, you're going to see this red wire. Right, you should pretty much be able to pull that red wire off the back there. And you see this grommet? The wire is actually fed through this little grommet right here, but there's a little slit in there. And you can pull it. You may need a little flathead sometimes just to pry this open. See, like that? It just pulls right out of there. And your ground wire, the little black wire that went to the bottom of the coil, slides out of there also. And that will free up your whole coil there. And you would just buy this piece to put back on. Now, if you need to replace the wiring, which also becomes an issue, because this wiring comes out of the side here where your pull start was and runs down behind the back, and it goes through this little clamp right there. So it actually feeds down through that. Now this one's been doctored up. You can see it's all spliced together here. So I'm going to show you on a model that's not spliced together. But this wire needs to be switched on this one too. But basically you'll unplug it down here. I'll show you on one of these. You can see on this one, they're just plugged in and they unplug like that. All right. Mine was all spliced together on the other one. There's 2 of them. just like that. They'll have little ends on them, and they pretty much just unplug, and that will allow you to change that wire. And that pretty much runs to your kill switch up here. I'll show you over here, your red kill switch. So if your machine is not shutting off, you could have a problem with that wire, or this switch here could be bad. We're not going to cover this switch in this tutorial because I'm pretty much focusing on the engine aspect of it. But basically, this is fairly easy to switch out. You can pry up on this switch here, and you'll be able to pull this out. And it basically just feeds down through this handle here. Now you got your new coil, and when you're ready to put it on, you got to make sure you do your wires first, because once you put this on, you're pretty much burying this little piece here where the red wire goes in the back, and you'll never be able to put the red wire on after you screw this in. All right, so what you want to do is put your red wire, slide your red wire on the back like so, and then you're going to take your little black wire, hold it over the little hole there, and you're going to slide your bolt through there. All right, so this way the little black wire is on now. And you're going to take your top bolt, you're going to slide that through the top hole. All right, wires are on, bolts are slid through. Now the important part, the little black spacers, they're going to go, turn the coil around on the back side, slide those on over the bolt. You're going to have to hold it with your finger, and then slide the other one on, and you got to hold them on with your finger. Okay, now you gotta have to line it up with the holes here without those black spacers falling off. Line the bolts up, okay, and you can try to start threading it in with your hand. Get the top one to grab first, and go down to the bottom one. Make sure that that black spacer doesn't fall off the back. All right, once you have them start, and you can't pull the bolts out now, they're both started. What I typically do is I'll screw these in just a little bit, not all the way tight, because there's still some adjusting we got to do. I'll screw them in a little bit so that this thing's not flopping around too much. Just a little bit, all right? Coil's still a little bit loose. Now, if you spin this, you'll see this is actually going to hit the coil, and this is another mistake people make. You hear that clanking noise? All right. You actually have to gap this here. Now, the easiest way to do this, because a lot of people aren't going to have a feeler gauge, is you get a little business card that folds. Not a real stiff business card. It's got to be able to fold, because this is magnetic, and what's happening is it's clinging to your wheel here, but you need to gap that out. So I have a little, let's see, I have a little turkey tag here, all right, that I use to label machines, but this bends. So what I'll do is I'm going to pull up on my coil so that the magnet's not stuck on this wheel. And I'm going to set this in the middle of it and hold my coil in place while I turn this. Right now, I'm not hitting that wheel anymore. All right, and as I'm holding that now, I'm going to go ahead and snug this up. All right, and you should be able to pull your turkey tag out like that. And now you should be able to turn it, and it's not hitting the wheel anymore. And that's how you put the coil back in. Go ahead and put your little black grommets back in here that was holding the whole wire assembly together, and put your boot back on the plug. Then you can put your case on and your pull start and everything else. Now, after you do that, I would recommend put the pull start on before you put the case and everything on. Fire it up. Make sure that you don't hear that thing clanking and rubbing on your coil. If you do, shut it down immediately. All right, but if everything seems to be running fine, go ahead, put your cover back on and everything else. The exhaust. A lot of times you'll feel that your blower doesn't have any power anymore, or perhaps you're having a problem starting it. Okay, again, that's a lot of things. It could be the ignition coil, it could be the fuel filter, it could be the plug, but sometimes it's the exhaust. All right, and a lot of carbon will build up in the head, in the actual head of your motor, in the port in here, and you have to clean that carbon out. Or maybe your exhaust is just got a hole in it or cracked, or whatever the reason is, you need to take this off regardless. There's going to be 3 really deep wells here that have a Torx head at the bottom of them, securing this to the head. We need to take those out. And you want to be very careful with your Torx head and something powerful, because if you strip them out, then you got all kinds of problems. Then you got to drill the bolt out and potentially damage the head. So what I typically recommend is to use your hand tool that came with it to crack these loose, get them loose, and then you can use your power tool to get them out. So you want to take your hand tool, and sometimes it's a little frustrating if you're doing this for the first time, and you got to try to find the center until this drops down in. You'll feel it drop into the bolt. And be very careful. Sometimes they're really tight. Crack it loose just like that. Crack it loose. All right, your bottom one is going to be the shortest bolt. So try to remember that. The very bottom hole is the short bolt. Then your exhaust will just pull off like that. You can tilt it upside down to get those bolts out. All right, and there's a gasket on the back, so you might be replacing this gasket. If you are, this is where you're going to do that gasket. It's pretty much just pops off like that. And you see how it's got the little hump there? That hump, you can obviously see where that goes in the exhaust. It would just go back on like that. And this is the port here that typically would build up a lot of carbon in here. You want to take a look inside in there, and you'll see the carbon build up. It'll pretty much be caked all in there, and you could also see your piston in there. When you pull your pull start, which is not on now, but you can turn the wheel here by turning this, and you'll see your piston going. Let's see if I can get in there. This camera is really crappy. I got to get a new phone. But you'll see your piston going up and down in there. All right. So what you want to do to clean this port out is I'll usually just take a little pick, and you want to turn this wheel on the side here to make sure that your piston is all the way up. I don't like putting it all the way down, because as I'm cleaning it, stuff will get inside on top of the piston or up inside the head, and you don't want all that debris up in there. Make sure the piston's all the way up, and you want to be very careful. You do not scrape the side of the piston with your tool. So you want to just go in there very carefully and pull out some of that carbon. All right, and I know you can't really see in there, but we're going to just clean the inside of that, of any carbon that's in there. And I'll typically tilt this on its side and bang some of that carbon out of there that we freed up. And then I'll get some my airline, and I'll blow around in there, okay, just to clean all that out. Chances are you will see some carbon build up in there. That's normal. But there is some cases where it builds up so much that it's affecting the performance of your blower. Now, after you clean that out, under here, there's going to be what they call a spark arrestor, okay? And a lot of times, it's just a screen. If the spark arrestor gets clogged up with carbon, then that's going to prevent the blower from running properly as well. Sometimes it won't start if it gets really clogged. Sometimes it'll just run really rough. But they're really easy to get to. It's just the 4 Torx heads right here. You want to back them out. And when you pull this cover straight off, there's going to be a screen under there. You're going to take that screen out, and you're pretty much just going to clean that screen. Make sure it's free of all carbon and everything. Lay it back in there. Put your 4 bolts back on. That's pretty much most of the common problems that you're going to have to, that you're going to run into with these machines. So, and that's how you repair them and get to them. If you're looking to replace the head gasket on these, which is also a very common problem, you can see the massive amounts of oil all around this head gasket here, all right? And that's where the head is a joint right here. And there's basically going to be 4 bolts around this head here that you got to take off. And the only way you're going to get to them is by removing this plate and separating this assembly, taking off the air cleaner. If you're looking to do that, if you look at a video below mine, I did a complete tutorial on replacing the head gasket on here and removing all this stuff. We're not covering that in this assembly because I already did it. Just go to my channel and look down a video or two below and you'll see Redmax head gasket repair. So hopefully this gives you an understanding on how to do all the repairs on your machine. If you're looking for something in particular, feel free to reach out to me, whattoDoRob@gmail.com, or just leave a comment below, and I try to get back to people within a couple of days. Sometimes I get a little bit busy, but that's it, guys. So if you could please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and of course, subscribe. I'm trying to get my subscribers up, and I will see you next time.